Hi everyone, welcome to Just Between You and Me. I'm Michael.
And I'm Michelle, and this video is going to be a little bit different because we're going to be diving a little bit into our connection. Michael has something that is coming up for him, so we're just going to see where this goes.
Perfect. So the structure around this video is as follows. Talking about the spirit of our connection, in the video we just made, we got to give a lot of great information about it. And as we talked about it, I really stepped into it, my experience of the spirit of our connection. And I'm feeling a lot of pain in my stomach, in my sacral chakra region. There's a lot of achiness and queasiness, and it's like, wow, where's this coming from? And I know very well that it's tuning into what we were talking about, the spirit of our connection. So I want to give some raw, authentic processing of what's here that, really hurts.
So start talking about it. Let's start.
There's been a lot of pain. This is very painful. There's been a lot of pain we've been experiencing, that I've been experiencing in our connection, where I've experienced great disconnection. And I've been responsible for creating such disconnection and really highlighting where I've been responsible for it. And so there's sacral is like the joy, the pleasure center, and right now it's like really painful. And it's really painful, I feel like, because of recognizing what mentalities I've grown up with and chosen as I've gone through life that really don't work for connection, for deep and intimate connection specifically, because I'm pretty good at like the outer layers of connection where I am, I've got blind spots, but there's things that happen in my closest connections that don't happen anywhere else. And as those have been coming up, it's been very painful for you, Michelle, and it's also been very painful for me. I bawled crying a couple days ago, really just getting to the heart of it with you, the heart of the experience. It just looks like such lack of empathy, such lack of connection, such lack of love. And while simultaneously trying so hard to get there, trying so hard to create understanding, create empathy, create compassionate connection, and feeling like it's impossibly out of reach. And that's been the experience, and it's so painful to have so much love here. Like, you can even watch some of the other videos we make and how like in love we are as we're doing it. Like, just the love vibration is so real. And when that gets kind of has to step back for like the disconnection part of our experience, that really hurts. I know it hurts for both of us. And it's such a, it impacts everything we do. It impacts everything we want to do, everything we want to create, all the vision we have for our connection, what we want to create together, we want to support each other in. And I've been really seeing with so much more clarity where my alignments are that makes that not work, makes those intentions not work, out of reach, impossible.
Yeah. I feel like we've spent the last, I don't know, probably 4-ish days, 5-ish days maybe, in a state of processing the connection and the spirit of the connection in a way that is, in a way that's really bringing out the wounding and attempting to create some much deeper healing than we have created before. And it's really fascinating because for me, it's all the topics that we've really talked about up to this point. It's about boundaries and walls and triggers and triggering and connection and like communication and clarity and communication and using whatever metaphors you can. And it's like a meta class on taking every concept and like using it simultaneously to create an understanding and a connection space that is healthy and healed and not wounded and attacking or triggering. And it's not exactly been easy in the last 5 days to really feel that and create that. And there's been, moments of feeling very desperate and feeling very unheard, and for both of us, and feeling very raw and really not feeling like there's space to express or be heard, and like they're being commandeering of emotions and commandeering of what's coming up for us, and it's just not been it's been really really honestly feels very damaging to
Yeah.
the spirit of our connection. And at the same time, like the steps that we're taking and the connection space that we're stepping into and the understanding and the work and the willingness is all important to that spirit of our connection and stepping into something new and different and something that is more than more than what's been created up until this point.
Yeah, all very well said. Right now I feel very damaged in my stomach, and I feel like it's an awareness of the damage in our connection. I want to know like what can be done. I want to find the way out to actually like heal the connection, because like it's not my first time I've been through this kind of like really
With an intimate partner.
yeah, and it's always had to dissolve before. And so the experiences that follow me from deep connection to deep connection, it's like, okay, these are really me. Like, I'm not saying there's no, co-creation on your end, of course. You have your stuff, and I need to figure out what the fuck is mine if I'm ever going to create this different and actually, like, live the transformation in order to reprogram, live the transformation in order to heal the connection. Really, because like I feel this pain in my stomach and it's like, Jesus, this is like really present. There's some kind of energy work or like love, golden light energy that I want to like wash this in to like be a step. And I know that's not the same as living the transformation, and it is an intention to like cleanse the energy of the connection. And that desire is there. And I also know that there's a long-term living the transformation that's like really the only holistic regenerative solution.
Yeah, the other solution that I'm aware of, specifically in this idea of like, oh, the connection's been wounded, how do we fix that? How do we cleanse that connection?
Yeah.
The only way that I'm aware of it is actually where we are willing to step into and offer support to the other person. So this is actually like only for situations where so it's really hard to explain why I believe this is what's needed, but it's what's needed from the party in the connection where the majority of the wounding is coming from. So like in this particular situation, in this moment, the way we've explained it and expressed it, the majority of the wounding is actually from your programming and stories and scripts that are running in your
the
head.
reactions and actions that come out of that for me. So that's what we see right now.
That's what we're seeing right now.
Right.
And so in order to heal that, what I have been aware of is that if the person who's doing that continues to sit in that and create more wounding, it wounds the connection further. But if that person is willing to step out and offer soothing, healing connection to the other person, it actually does simultaneously two things. It helps support the healing of the connection, and it actually supports the other person in feeling less disconnected, which is actually what's causing the wounding in the connection. It's the feeling of like trying to be pulled apart.
Wow, yeah. So there's like a healing in the giving and supporting is what I'm hearing from me to you.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of...
I hear that.
It takes a lot of like self-understanding and self-knowledge to be willing to step into that. And it's not like I can sit here and say, you need to do this, because I can't tell you what you need to do.
Sure. I see the value in that. I'd like to respond that I really do see the value in that. And that's, in a way, it's another iteration of the onion of like, I've come to this before. And like, in what you just said, I've like come to it again deeper. It's this idea of like, the more space I can hold for me where I'm at and support others, the more I grow and the more I expand. And there's an expansion in that into different mindsets, different neuron pairings, different mindsets and reactions and choices, different actions. And
I want to be really clear with what I'm describing here, because I'm not describing giving up on your boundaries and on what you need and on your desires and on that. That's actually not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most challenging parts, but yes.
Yeah, it's actually adding on to. It's like being firm in the boundaries and the decisions and everything, but also being willing to come towards the win-win rather than saying, well, in order for you to win, I have to lose, which is an independent thinking concept rather than an interdependent thinking concept.
Sure.
And it's very much more of a, okay, how do I win and how do I create a win with you too?
Yeah, win-win in the giving.
How do I create a win-win in the giving? Because it's not about like, let me prostrate myself before you and let me just give everything up to you. No, that doesn't work.
Right.
That's completely not what we're talking about.
And it really does make sense too, because like a lot of this pain is in my sake was from the lack of pleasure and lack of enjoyment in what I have co-created in our connection, what I'm responsible for. So a lot of it is an internal, like, I don't want to say beating myself up because I don't feel it here in my heart. I don't feel like unworthy, like my wounding is not my fault, but my healing is my responsibility. Like I don't feel like, lesser. And in the moment, I really have those. Like when those come up, sometimes I can really feel like just shrinking into the smallest version of myself and hiding in a hole and realizing what's come up, what's resulted through me in our connection to you.
Yeah.
And so while acknowledging that, there's a creating of pleasure in being of service to you and being supportive to you and giving to you. That's the opposite of what I'm currently experiencing. So it makes sense to walk in that direction.
And that's a bumpy road. That's not something that's easy, especially if you're used to the other way of it happening, of like...
What's the default?
Like the default is either I have to be completely about me or completely about you, and there's no in between, because that's a very difficult mindset, and that's very much not what we're speaking to here.
Yeah.
It's about how do we create both at the same time, rather than it being all about you or all about me.
Yeah. And I want to be clear of a bit of the bigger picture here. Like there's an evolution here. And right now what we can see is the mentalities that have sourced through me that have caused damage here. That doesn't mean there's nothing that Michelle's responsible for.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean that there's not more that we'll see for me or for her down the road. We've seen things for me and for her. And right now there's a wisdom in like I don't know if there's a more constructive way to say this, but like my wounding needs the most attention right now. And it's needed that. And I've had to receive that and surrender to that in order to figure out how to shift from it in our connection. Until then, there was a vicious cycle. And that was really hard for both of us.
Yeah.
So accepting that has been really important. And in the future, there may be an accepting it in the reverse direction. And I'm not attached to that. I don't need to create that. But there's a surrendering to the now and knowing that it's not the norm forever.
Yeah, and really working to make sure that it isn't the norm forever, because it doesn't need to be. And there's just because one or the other of us needs a little more work in this moment, that doesn't mean that it won't switch tomorrow. Like we don't have any knowledge of whether it's going to stay that way or if it's going to shift. And that's very real, and that's in the dynamic of the connection, and that's in the dynamic of the space that we're in, and what's being created. And there's a lot there, and it's never going to be perfect, and that's okay. And there's give and take, and there's offering and receiving, and there's creating whatever the space is that's needed. And it's a very fragile space right now.
It is. And as long as it's never going to be perfect, but as long as there's compassion and empathy and movement of energy, a flowing river, not a stagnant pond, it becomes livable. It becomes okay. Yeah. Jesus Christ, this hurts.
I've noticed that your body language is shifting a little bit.
Yeah.
And like, I was noticing it because we can see the screen that we film on. So I was noticing that like you're shifting and you're kind of closing up. So I'm going to offer you some space to like be safe. And if you want, open a bit back up, knowing that you're being held and loved and that there's safety here, and just like offering that if you want it.
Yeah, I receive that. There's a lot of vulnerability in owning this to the camera, to whoever may see it. There's a lot of vulnerability in like talking through it and like feeling the pain of the results of the months of this. Like it's almost like our connection has gone through iterations of getting closer and closer to this ultimate breaking point. and like focus on what's working, focus on what's working, focus on what's working. Here, this is not working. Okay, patch it up, move on. Here's what's working, here's what's working, here's what's working. This isn't working. And every time it took less time to get back to that until it's like the thing that doesn't work in our connection that needs the most attention.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's really hard to name the exact thing that's not working. Like it's not just easy to be like, oh, it's that we don't spend enough time together. That's simple.
No.
It's not like that. And so we're trying to like explain it and describe it, and the reality is that it's like it's a very complicated concept for us.
When it's a synergy of like 20 mindsets, and you know, a few of them trigger at once.
That's what's been happening is it's past triggering, it's past trauma triggering, and it's neither of our, it's like no fault of anybody. Like we were saying, it's the wounding isn't our fault, but the healing is our responsibility.
The ownership is there.
And the ownership is there, yeah.
Yeah. And I want to make it clear that I had it in the ownership being here, the 20 mindsets triggering, it's not as simple as like, oh, here it is. We can choose to like shift and just focus on the love. Like the thought that I have in the complexities we're speaking to is, how do we simplify? How do we keep it simple? Like wouldn't that be easy to think on the receiving end? Like just, it's just too complicated, just simplify it. And the reality is like, we've chosen that a lot. We've chosen to like, okay, this isn't working. We're just going to choose the warm and fuzzy in our connection and move on. And the reality is we get brought right back around again to what doesn't work, to the point where it's like, no matter how complex or simple we see it in the moment, we get to figure out how to make it simple without avoiding it.
Yeah.
And that does involve digging into complexities and layers of I don't know, and layers of this is confusing and I feel lost and I feel hopeless, and learning deeper about self.
Yeah. And not making it, not coding it in like toxic positivity or like sugarcoating it in some form of like, oh, just smile it away. Like that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
I mean, there's a time for that. There's a time to show up and choose the love in our hearts and put our walls down as best we can. And like, you know, it's one thing to have a trigger and choose different. It's another thing to like have this synergy of whatever triggers we have that lead to such a feeling of disconnection that there is no smiling through it.
Yeah.
There's just like,
we get to deal with it.
Yeah. Like that's been one of the stories of my life, and like how to really fix that foundational piece so that that's not the case, so that we can show up to a family function or a commitment of any kind, no matter what trigger may or may not happen beforehand, and really be able to just choose love and show up in it.
Yeah.
And not feel like there's a foundational gapping hole between us that hours ago we were in perfect love. Like,
yeah, and then
you know,
then there was a situation that got created, and then there was some feelings, and
yeah, so I think that highlights the problem pretty well, the repeated experience from me, and like the displeasure in that of like there was such perfect love and now it's like such disconnection. It's like,
yeah,
it's like, you know, the roots of the tree dig into the soil and then get ripped out, and then they dig into the soil and they get ripped out, and then they dig in, and that repeated experience hurts.
Yeah, it does.
And to realize where I'm accountable for it is like hurts even more. And it doesn't have to hurt forever. And that's the realization here, is that I can choose different. That's the empowered perspective, is I can choose different and feel good about that choice, and feel good about like the proof is in like how you receive it. Like what feels good is I see you receive support a certain way and you smile. And you've talked about this too, like me acknowledging where I've received support from you, where you've supported me, and acknowledging that, and that's like eating the fruit of investing in another person and like bringing it full circle. And,
yeah,
you know, creating that.
Yeah. One of the spaces that we've been falling into that's simplest to describe is, for me, is this idea that there's been a triggering that's occurred when I start sharing something that's coming up for me. There's been a mirroring of, well, I feel that too, which is what you've been doing. It's like, well, I'm feeling hurt. Well, I feel that too. And then we start processing Michael because there's this like wall where he won't let go of the Me Too concept. And so then we end up processing him, and then he gets mad because we never process me. And I'm like, and I fed into that. I was like, oh, of course we need to focus on you. That's okay. And I'm not drawing my own boundaries. So I'm letting my boundaries get crossed and feeding into his mindset. So it's like my mindset's feeding into his, and then it's feeding back, and it's creating this vicious cycle. And so there were situations where I never felt like I was understood or empathized with, because you would commandeer my feelings rather than expressing empathy, which I think we're going to cover in an upcoming video.
Right. We can cover it in a shorter video, like what empathy is, but I am going to tie this full circle here. That's been the choice, because like it's been really real for me when I've said Me Too. It's like word for word, that experience reversed, true for Me Too. And those are the moments when it's like there's a reaction without even a conscious thought of like, you want empathy for this, I want empathy for this. Like, and I don't say that with the intention to commandeer the process, and nevertheless that's what happens, like as a default in you to like switch to focusing on me when I'm just like putting cards on the table. To me, that's a layer of communication. And what I've had to learn to do is hold that for now and really focus on creating the experience of empathy for Michelle in that experience, because regardless of whether I go through it too, she goes through it too, and it's real for her, for you, and there's feels there. And to really say, hey, I see you, means more than just to say, hey, I see you, because like I can hear what's coming from you and really feel it, but there's a depth in being able to say, so what I'm hearing you say is, and I see how that creates this experience, and like it's not just about the words, it's not about the script, it's about the way they're said. It's what I'm learning more and more with you. It's the way they're said, where it's like, the more I feel connected to your experience, the more I actually am.
Yeah. And it's not about whether or not you feel it too. Spiderweb. Dust.
Dust fuzzy between us.
So yeah, so that's one of the layers upon layers that have been coming up more repeatedly, and so there's like a more direct, here's the thing, than we've been able to give previously. So, and
then really letting go of that, like, just creating empathy for Michelle, and then not talking about the Me Too part, like that does come back around, and the trust of that feels so defeating for me. I've had to learn to trust it, but it's felt so like it's triggered past experiences of like showing up for the other person and never getting my side of it out, and like not being so gung-ho about not wanting to be in a suppressor space or like withholding any information, and wanting to actually process what's here on this end too, and not be like a closed book. There's kind of been a slam to the other extreme, which is like story of my life. Where is the middle?
Michael likes to live his life in extremes.
Michael's learning differently. And so there's a way to like create that surrender, and then go to still have space to express later, like, I have this feeling too, but there's a connection in the moment first. I do want to say my stomach feels a lot better in talking about this, so it feels like there's a clarity here of where, like, I don't feel like it's like our connection is at where it's at. There's probably some healing that happened here, and again, like, I feel like a reorientation was created in my stomach to like live the transformation and create it different, because this is not just about me and you. This is really about me and all my intimate connecting, and you're the example of the moment. It could be it's not personal in that way. In this moment, I understand that. And at any moment, it could be the exact opposite. It could be that I'm the one who's living out a script in our connection that I've had my entire connection life. And I'll say this, that's what unconditional love is letting someone in this close to your heart and letting these triggers happen and these reflections happen and this pain happen, and choosing forgiveness, choosing compassion, and choosing to move forward and create it differently together. That's powerful shit. Yeah. I feel like that's a pretty good place to wrap this up, actually. Period.
So hopefully this will, this particular video will see the light of day at some point. We don't know when.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you for joining us on this really strange and special edition of Just Between You and Me. If you have any comments or anything you'd like to share, leave that in the comment section down below. And if you want to get a hold of us or learn any more about us, that is in the description section down below.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us on Just Between You and Me.
Remember to like, share, subscribe.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us on Just Between You and Me. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Michael.
And we'll see you next time.
Mwah.